I'm piling in. Got it. Thank you. I think we'll have more folks piling in as the morning goes. I think you all are probably experiencing what a lot of the board members are experiencing, doing a lot of things at once, having a lot of conversations about a lot of emerging and important topics, and while working harder than ever. And I'm going to enable transcription. Thank you. I've got folks helping me manage the day, largely the board. The graphic you're looking at was developed by Kelly Driftmeyer, one of the members at large. So throughout the day, we'll have the board members doing various things to help move the event along. But I just wanted to say welcome. We had our fall meeting, as you know, in the end of the year. There's some good work that came out of that. And we were just talking before this meeting started that almost a year ago to the day we had this spring meeting. So the way things line up, sometimes I just can't believe it, how things work out. And I wanted to take a moment to really thank the board to help drive this spring meeting and get it put together and focus on the theme, get the word out about it. A lot of good work, a lot of hours put in by a lot of folks. And I definitely couldn't have done it without them. I actually had to kind of turn over a lot of the tasks to move this forward to get us to where we are today. And Emily especially did a lot of the prompting and driving me along to keep things on track. So I really appreciate the help. So it's a strong board, and I think going into next year we'll have our fall meeting, of course, but we've got some membership items to talk about. Going to do a quick mention of the Professional Development Award. We've got a little update on the graduate student membership. We've got a treasurer update. Our other member at large, Aaron Cassidy, is going to speak a little bit about the Ukrainian Library Association donation. We've got four presentations that range from everything from citations to wine. So we've got a nice show and sell session. Our 10:30 workshop, making virtual meetings inclusive, exploring equity gaps. I think as we return to campus, I'm sure you're experiencing this too. Hybrid meetings. I'm still doing a lot of remote or Zoom meetings, and I think it's been interesting, this return to campus, this last 6, 8, 9, 10 months that folks have been coming back and into their workplace or not working remote anymore. The world of meetings has definitely changed. So I think I think that session will be really interesting. That's Dr. Clara Smith. Again, one of the board members reached out and worked with her to get that session booked today. We've got a 12 to 1 break for lunch. We will have some music to enjoy our lunch by. And thank you to Aaron for putting that together. And then in the afternoon, we're going to do some roundtable discussions. One, because it's the afternoon. So rather than having to sit through presentations, we'll get the chance to do some discussion. I've got a million things going on. So like you, extremely busy. And days like this, it's nice to slow down and realize, one, we need to have conversations like this. I'm really glad Coral puts events on like this, because it gets us to slow down for a minute and actually think about the larger world that we're working in and the work that we're doing, from inclusivity, new instructional methods, and the way we're changing our library services, or looking into the future to shape our library services, especially with this post-COVID lens. I know a lot of our operations here have changed. And one of the trends I just saw this week, is I actually had to spend some time out on a couple service points because we were short-staffed. So staffing is another issue libraries are facing. I've seen an upsurge of people wearing masks again. So it's really, we're really in a different age and different time. So slowing down and having these conversations and listening to what our colleagues are doing, I think it's really beneficial work for us. And then the networking alone and hearing the good work that's happening can also be a little bit of recharge for you. So we are now moving into, I want to pay attention to the time so I don't drift too far. I think we're going to move right into the treasurer update, and then I'm going to swing back and do the PD announcement, the professional development winner announcement. We'll mention the board elections, quick update on the graduate student membership, and then Aaron, you can jump in. Is the slide still up and ready for you, Emmy?
Emmy isn't here.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
So,
That.
okay.
So I'll do a quick treasurer update. Emmy does excellent work here, so I haven't had to worry too much about this. Honestly, she really has kept us on track this fiscal year, putting the calls out for membership renewals, and has done a good job of just managing the finances and keeping us on track. As you can see, we're healthy right now. So as an organization, I think going into the future, will be viable, and this work can definitely continue. So the numbers on the screen, obvious. I won't read every single one of them, but I feel good. I feel good about the health and history for Coral into the future. So on our PD award winner, Michael Hughes at Trinity University, there were some really nice applications for the Professional Development Award. Michael's really rose to the top because it dealt with project management. He really spelled out how he was going to use his award to earn his certificate, and then train others at his library. And he's going to present also to the Coral membership. And I'm sure, like all of you, the number of projects that we're being expected to run, the way we're being expected to transform our library is just really, it's project driven work where a lot of tasks have to be accomplished by a lot of different people, a lot of different departments. So we've always done complex work, but I think the complexity of what libraries are accomplishing is definitely growing more. So having a project management background or skill set and somebody that we can draw on like this is real excellent. So we're really happy to award Michael Hughes, Trinity University, this award. I'm going to ask Andrea Michelia, Vicky Hart to just jump in about the Coral Board elections. I've kind of been moving along in my role, but always learning. So it's on their radar a little more than mine, but I know we need to get to that. Can you all speak to that just a little bit?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
So I think oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's coming up and we need, I believe, do we put together a committee to
Yes.
form a slate of candidates and then send that out to the membership to vote? So that's all I know about it.
So if anybody's interested in being on the nominating committee, I would say definitely reach out to one of the board members and let them know, hey, you'd like to take part in that. It's nothing super difficult. And we give you really good instructions on top of that. So it's a great way just to get involved. Once we have that slate of nominees, as Vicki was saying, we're going to send that out to the membership and you all will be able to vote on your next board. And I think that this is critical just for the longevity of Coral. You know, we've been very lucky to have some really great board members continue the legacy of this group. So I just encourage you, if you've never served on the board, please think about doing so. It's extremely rewarding. You learn a lot and you make some great, just some great contacts across all the institutions.
And one other thing I would add is it's not difficult and it is not as time consuming as you would think it is. Because that was my biggest concern. And I found that I've been more than able to give the time that I feel Coral deserved. Maybe I should have given a little bit more this year, but I think that we've been very productive and I felt 100% a part of it. So I would just let people know if you're feeling the time crunch, it doesn't take up as much time as you might think.
Yeah, I reiterate everything Andrea and Vicki mentioned. It's a great opportunity to connect with other librarians in the area. You know, I had the opportunity to serve on the board and Andrea and I were able to go to a conference together. And I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much if I didn't have a buddy to have attended that with. And that connection came out of serving on the Coral board. So I highly encourage any of you with an interest in building those connections, in building the opportunity to push an organization forward and bring some ideas to fruition. Again, just a great opportunity to connect with people and serve the community.
Yeah, fantastic. And I can tell you, it's truly been a collaborative effort. There's just been times where I just haven't been able to move things forward as fast as I wanted to, or been able to do as much coordination. And folks on the board have stepped in. So you're really not alone, especially if you ask for help. The folks who are involved definitely have years of experience. Like Andrea, how long have you been involved with Coral now?
Gosh, I don't even remember. I can tell you it was back when we had an
couple years
antiquated website. So
yeah, okay, great. Yeah. So you've got and Michelia, I mean, she's been involved in a while now. I mean, we've just got a lot of people with a lot of knowledge. And so you're not alone in helping Coral stay vibrant and move forward. So yeah, there's a lot that can be done there. And so moving into the graduate student membership, I don't see Amanda here, so I'm not sure if she was able to make it. But we've got Michelia and Andrea, maybe they can speak a little bit to that, because I think it affects the bylaws and we need to form a committee to really kind of work it in. Am I right about that?
Yeah, so the good news is the leaders of the organizations who were able to read through the draft of what we were proposing voted to start up a graduate membership in Coral. So we're really excited about all the opportunities that presents to the organization, and also to students going through the program here in San Antonio, especially if they're participating in remote programs. Just the awareness that brings to them about the different libraries that are here that they can join and support as well. So the committee that we'll be putting together will help really define what that membership looks like. And like Lee mentioned, there will be changes to the Coral bylaws. So as that committee, puts ideas together and really shapes out how it can help the graduate students and also us as member organizations, will be letting the membership know the changes that are being proposed to the bylaws. And so we'll be working through that entire process as an entire group here. But just look out for that call if you're interested in how you can support the graduate students in the area, especially if you are a graduate student or if you have graduate students in your organization already, getting to know what would be beneficial to them and how we can really help, again, serve the community here as an organization.
Fantastic. Thank you. Aaron, I'd like to turn it over to you now, and if you could speak a little bit about the donation to the Ukrainian Library Association.
Sure. Back in, I believe it was March or April, I attended a virtual session in which the president of the Ukrainian Library Association spoke, and also what amounts to the Minister of Archives. They told us, and that's basically what his job was. And many librarians across Ukraine who shared their stories of what had been going on there, which it was, of course, horrible. These people were so traumatized, you could tell by just looking at them. Some of them were living in their libraries. It was all types of libraries too. Some of them were academic or public or school libraries. They had shared how they were reaching out to their communities. Some of them were actually living in the library, sheltering with their pets and their families and their patrons. And they shared with us some links about how people can help, because people usually want to help, they just aren't sure the best way to go about it. So they shared with us a couple of links, and they also shared that they specifically for the Ukrainian Library Association had created a fund to which librarians in Ukraine could apply for grants to help them personally, what they're going through. So I will, let me share the links. I have them. There's 3 different links, one of which is specifically the way to share, to help the librarians fund. And what I would propose is that if you are interested, it gives all the instructions on how to do like a bank transfer and stuff. And it looks like kind of, if it seems a little daunting, that I would be happy to coordinate a donation from the group if people wanted to donate such as that, if they wanted to have it be a collection in a larger amount, then I'd be happy to collect that and put it through the proper channels. Or if you want to do it directly. There are also 2 other links that they shared, one of which was, it was actually a Canadian library who was organizing the session, and they created a list of links. And then another one that they shared was helpsaveukraine.com, which was another way to donate. But I thought that the Librarians Fund was a very compelling one. And if we wanted to help librarians specifically, these people really are heroes. They were continuing to operate in their services as much as possible as shelters, and continued to try to share information. And some of them were having their the aid organizations within their libraries, and it was incredible. These people were incredible. So it would be great if we could help them out. And if, as I said, if you want to do it yourself, feel free, or else if you were interested and wanted to make a larger collection for the Ukrainian Librarians Fund, check out these links. And I'd be happy to coordinate a donation if that's what we wanted to do. So just let me know.
Great. Yeah, I think we could probably send these out through the Coral email also, with maybe a couple quick thoughts that you just mentioned here.
Sure.
So send it out to large listserv too. Great. So we are on time. So we're coming up on 9 o'clock. These will be a short series of presentations, so show and sell and show and fail. So four different presentations here, everything from, again, covering citations, graphic novels, experiential learning, and Aaron's going to cover when you can start drinking. which, you know, depending on your beverage of choice, it could be now. So we got a little break. That's something we want to be mindful of these days is I try to not run my meetings back to back. And so same with these sessions, we're trying to make sure we're not just running back to back throughout the day. So we wanted to have a little break now. Give people a chance to stretch their legs and get more coffee or whatever it is. And then we will pick right back up at 9 o'clock. So don't go anywhere. All right, well, welcome back, everyone. We are at our 9 o'clock present series of presentations session. And I'm going to let Miss Vicky Hart, the NLC Library Director, if she could take us through these presentations here and introduce each of the folks.
All right, thanks, Lee. So good morning, everybody. We're going to have our 4 show and sell or show and fail presentations right now. I will remind the participants that you have 10 minutes, and I'm going to set a timer so we stay on track. I would ask all the members listening, if you have any questions, please hold them till the end of Erin's presentation, and then we'll let the participants take your questions. Fair enough? So to begin, please welcome Andrew Rivera. Andrew Rivera is at Northeast Lakeview College. He is the information literacy librarian there. I know that because I'm his boss. And Andrew today is going to talk to you about the citation workshops that were our wildly important goal last semester. So give me 1 second. And Andrew, if you'd like to get started, you have been enabled to share your screen. Perfect.
Awesome. Can everyone hear me okay? Perfect. So good morning, everyone. So my name is Andrew Rivera. I'm the information literacy librarian here at Northeast Lakeview College. Today I'm going to go over our citation workshops. I would say that they are a show and sell. So just kind of give you a quick overview. These citation workshops were kind of focused on our wildly important goal for fall and for spring. So it's something that we kind of put together last minute in fall, but overall we kind of beta tested it in the fall as well. So they're focused on the English 1301 and 1302 classes, which are our basic level English classes here at NLC. So these citation workshops covered in-text citations, citation resource, and different resource types. Now, when I say citation resources, I'm kind of looking at like the Purdue OWL, Noodle tools, things like that students can access and use on their own. Workshops were completed in fall of 2021 and spring 2022. Like I said, we beta tested it in fall. What we gathered and what we got out of it in fall, we definitely put to use in the spring. These were done via Zoom, mainly because we weren't sure of the COVID situation. So we mainly focused on Zoom. I think moving forward, we may try to face-to-face option coming this fall. We marketed via flyers. We communicated through faculty, English faculty specifically, and we also did course announcements. Here at NLC, we do have a library course that all English 1301 students have to complete. And so we were able to communicate through that Canvas course to let students know about our citation workshops as well. Students were able to register. When they registered, we asked for their name, their class, and their student identification number. And the reason behind that, it helps us to communicate with that student as far as reminding them and saying, hey, the citation workshop is going to be happening in a day or tomorrow, whenever it is. So that helps us to be able to communicate with those students that way. So to gauge, we did a pre-citation workshop survey and we did a post-citation workshop survey. And ultimately, once again, we use that to gauge where the students were and where the students were at after the citation workshop. And it also helped us to kind of better gauge as far as where can we improve the citation workshops going forward. So the stats. So we did 2 MLA citation workshops in fall 2021. And so, like I said, those were kind of our beta test. They gave us a lot of good information of how to move forward and proceed in the spring. In the spring, we did 4. So for the fall, we had 9 students registered, 4 attended in fall 2021. So overall, we had about a month and a half to where we had to get these done. So I think 4 is a really good number as far as those that attended, especially with outreach and contacting those students to let them know about this workshop happening. So in the spring, we have quite a few more students register, and then we doubled our attendance overall. So that was kind of on par for what we had in the fall. So Once again, those 8 students that did attend were we were able to reach out to them and let them know that this workshop was able to take place. So the feedback. So once again, we did have a pre-citation workshop survey, and then we had a post survey. We asked a couple of different questions. The first question there that we see is, how would you rate your familiarity with citations? So we did a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being very unfamiliar and 5 being very familiar. Overall, the average improved from 2.78 from the pre-survey to a post-survey of 4.25. So the second question there, how would you rate your familiarity with in-text citations? Improved from a 3 to a 4.25. How would you rate your familiarity with knowing the purpose and function of citations? Improved from a 3.22 to a 4.25. How would you rate your familiarity with authoritative citation resources that could be used to help with developing citations? Improved from a 3.11 to a 4.25. And how would you rate your self-confidence in developing citations? And that improved from a 3 to a 4.25. So those are averages there from the student responses. So that lets us know that these citation workshops were helpful. So some of the challenges and some of the successes. So some of the challenges, students that did register did not always attend. And that's one of those things that we're looking to try to figure out a better way to solve that issue. Maybe it's more communication, more reminders. And it very, very well could be that students had other things come up. Life happens. So, it's hard to say, but we're looking at incorporating more reminders to remind those students that, hey, by the way, this workshop's coming up in 1 week, 2 days, 1 day, whatever it may be. Another challenge that we have is reaching those students who need the workshops the most. A lot of those students that did attend tended to be high B, A students. And so we were trying to hopefully reach those students that were, probably struggling a little bit, had some issues with probably trying to find resources or citing their resources. And so that's one of our goals too coming up, is how can we reach those students that need this help the most? And then getting student feedback. So as you said earlier, there were a number of students that did attend. So 4 attended the first session, or the first during the fall semester, 8 attended in the spring semester, but not everyone provided the post-survey feedback. So that's another thing we're going to look at and improve upon as well. Is how can we get that post-survey feedback to better improve these citation workshops to meet the student needs? So the successes. We found that there was a definite need for these citation workshops. Students attended, students asked questions about them. They were something that they were happy to attend. They felt as if there was a weight lifted off their shoulders with some of the responses when I spoke to the students face person to person via Zoom. So there was definitely a need for these citation workshops. These are actually something they're going to be now implemented through the academic year. So we're not only going to incorporate just MLA, but we're also going to incorporate APA citation workshops as well going forward to see if we can reach a lot of those students in the STEM and STEM areas. And then a citation workshop tutorial was created using LibWizard. So if those students needed any kind of citation help and weren't able to attend any of these workshops, there was a tutorial that was created that goes along with a LibGuide to where they can kind of go through this tutorial to get a better understanding, a better idea of how these citations work, and in-text citations and other tools that they can use to get more of that information. All right. So if you do have any questions, here is my contact information. You can definitely contact me via phone or via email at any time. So we are still testing this whole process as far as the citation workshop goes, but we're super excited about it. And I think it has been a success so far. And I think we will continue to improve upon it to definitely help those students in the long run.
Great. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Came in 8 minutes. Hoorah. So next we have Gabriel Lopez, who is joining us from Our Lady of the Lake University. and the title of his presentation is Getting Graphic, Creating a Comics Collection. So there he's sharing his screen. All right, Gabriel, go ahead.
Unmuted. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Gabe Lopez. I'm the acquisition technician for the Saltonpas Library at Our Lady of the Lake. I'm also the selector for the popular and graphic novels collection, and I serve on the marketing committee. First, I'd like to thank the Choral Board for this opportunity to present to you, especially Emily for her support and guidance, and Kelly Driftmeyer for her gentle yet firm push to present today. And a big thank you to everyone at the Saltonpas Library. The graphic novels collection would not have happened without everyone's support and hard work. And a special shout out to our director, Maria Cabanis, who initially created our popular collection. And the graphic novels collection grew out of that. And Yanita Cruz, our systems and web services librarian. She's done wonders with our marketing and social media accounts. And she has tirelessly helped us get the word out about our collection in the best way possible. Finally, I would like to thank Dr. Sarah Evans at the University of North Texas for her Information 5415 class, graphic novels and comics. This class reignited my love of the format and opened my eyes to how the world of comic books has evolved. And today, my presentation will focus on the creation and advertising of our graphic novel section, and other issues like title selection or collection development policy, or even challenge statements could be separate presentations. So I'm just going to kind of focus on how we got started and how we advertised. So first, language matters. You know, you might ask, why say graphic novels collection and not comics collection? Comics usually refer to a single issue or a series of stories told in a long multi-issue format like the traditional superhero comics. Additionally, comics are sometimes associated with the funny papers or juvenile subject matter. The term graphic novels tends to be taken more seriously than the term comics. And for better or worse, this adds legitimacy and a certain gravitas to the issue. Next, what is a graphic novel? I get this question a lot, and I think that's something that even students might ask. Merriam-Webster's defines graphic novels as a story that is presented in a comic strip format and published as a book. Traditionally, this has meant collections of single issues of long-running comic books. For example, Batman issues number 45 to 50. Or even a long-form single narrative like Alison Bechdel's Funny Home. It is also important to note that graphic novels are a format and not a genre. Graphic novels now run the gamut of topics from superhero tales to medical narratives. And we should also take this moment to define graphic to mean illustrative in nature, not necessarily the type of subject matter that is broached within the comic. However, there can be titles that are quite graphic, but for our purposes, we're just finding this as an illustrative storytelling. Furthermore, graphic novels are produced all over the world, including the BDs or bande dessinée in France, or even manga in Japan. So why graphic novels in an academic library? First and foremost, student requests. We had started the popular collection a few years ago with the aim of creating a culture of reading among the students and patrons. And after I began selecting for POP, I started adding more graphic novels, and we immediately had student requests for us to collect more, especially manga. Next, this is a wonderful way to add diverse voices to our collection. Our student population is largely Latinx and female, so the new growth in diverse voices in graphic novels has really helped us diversify our collection in new ways. Next, I firmly believe that graphic novels belong in the classroom. Graphic novels can provide faculty with new materials to supplement their curricula in a way that may be more accessible to students. And finally, graphic novels and comics are fun. As much as comics can add to the scholarly conversation, they can also just be a good time and a relaxing way to provide patrons with an escape, especially in today's crazy world. And this might be a great way to draw patrons into the library. So for our planning stage, during our library retreat on August the 4th in 2021, I presented the idea of the graphic novel collection to the library leadership and staff. There was immediate support, and we began the discussions about logistics and possible issues with creating the section. One of the first things that we would need to create a separate shelving location in our ILS, which for us, we use OCLC's WMS. We decided that graphic novels would work as a subset of popular. Also maintaining call order and shelving procedures. Since graphic novels run such a large range of subjects, they also have a large range of call numbers. Usually they focus in the PN, but there can be very, like so many more. And also shelving can be tricky due to the variations in size and width of graphic novels. Some can be very tall, some can be very thin. And finally, we decided on what titles we should include. In our case, we decided not only graphic novels, but also books about graphic novels, including creator bios, education guides, and guides to using graphic novels. So that fall, we had a big announcement that we actually had graphic novels in the library. So during the first week of the fall 2021, we hosted a free comic book day to welcome the students into the library space and to advertise the graphic novels we had available. We offered snack bags and a raffle for prizes. We also provided students with 2 free comics. I had collected comics from the official free comic book day event that happens every year. And also Half Price Books on San Pedro donated 50 to 60 comics for us. We had 50 students and some staff come by and interact with us. And we had a staff member from our RGV campus reach out. And so we were able to ship them 10 comics to hand out to the students on that campus. We also had a separate display with graphic novels from the section for students to look at and check out. And that day we had about 5 to 6 checkouts. So after our announcement and during the fall, we really spent that time working out the workflow and the specifics of the move. The first step was collecting titles from the popular collection. We had about 100 titles in there already, and also titles from our general stacks. We had about 200 there. So right now, graphic novels is standing a little over 300 titles. We had intended for the graphic novels to stay on the same run of shelves as the popular collection, but as we identified titles in the general stacks, we discovered that we needed more room. So we decided to move graphic novel collections to another location and a run of shelves across from the popular collection, but they would still be forward facing and they would still be close, if not adjacent. We ordered graphic novel labels on the books since not all of our students, our student workers aren't familiar with graphic novels. We needed some way to identify them. So if we ever had to reshelve them, we could immediately place where they were going to go. And we also worked out where they would work on the spine label and on the front cover. And we had to account for variation in size for those. And as we were creating the separate locations for them, we also created a separate location in WMS. And all of the titles had their locations changed as part of that workflow. We were able to accomplish the move in about 2 weeks during the January holiday break. And we were able to start planning for the spring semester with our advertising. And you can see some of the pictures here we have. This is what graphic novels look like inside of our discovery tool. So you can see Saltonfest Library, popular graphic novels. This is actually our placement for the call number labels and the graphic novel sticker. If the graphic novel is too thin to allow for spine placement, we do place them on the front cover. And this can be its own issue because it's not uniform on the shelf. So if you want everything to look the same, this could be kind of hard, but we decided to go with this hard and fast. Wherever the call number label went, that's where the sticker for graphic novels would go. And here we actually have a picture of the section. So our first bay is for our display purposes. We also have a row of shelves in the middle. And so right now we cover about 3 bays and we're hoping that it will continue to grow. So for our advertising, we had previously established To Be Read Tuesdays, where we featured on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram pages. So during the spring, everything focused on graphic novels. So we started January with movie and TV tie-ins, African American Heritage Month in February, Women's History titles for March, and graphic poetry in April. And then shortly after we unveiled the collection, we had a faculty member reach out for a flyer, and we developed a lid guide to introduce new readers to comic books. And then we also have our display bays, which we feature every month. And then we also featured graphic novels in our semester splash newsletter. And in the newsletter, we also had links so students could request titles and also request titles for ILL, because we really want the students to inform what we collect so that they know that they can find the stuff that they're looking for. So some of our successes.
Excuse me, that's 10 minutes. Are
Okay.
are you pretty close to done? Because we've got a couple extra that Andrew didn't use. So if you're almost done, we'll let you finish.
Yeah, I apologize for running a little bit long, but I definitely want to get into some of our successes.
Okay,
Free Comic
great.
Book
Please,
Day.
please do. Please do.
Okay, so Free Comic Book Day was definitely a success. We'll be repeating that in the fall. One of our tweets for where we mentioned an author had over 3,000 impressions and was retweeted by the author. So that's definitely great for getting information out there. Word of mouth has been great for us. And checkouts, there's only been 22 since January, but that's one of those things I feel like as word of mouth spreads, people will start to check out more. And then in the future, we have more faculty outreach. So presentation for our Provost Professional Days, maybe opportunities for shared reading in some of our classes. There's a possible graphic novels class coming, maybe even graphic novel discussion groups and opportunities for student creations. So thank you so much. And I look forward to any questions you might have near the end of the presentations.
Thank you, sir.
Mhm.
Our next speaker is Karen Briere. She is at San Antonio College, and today her title is Triple Win, Students, Faculty, Library. Welcome, Karen.
Hi, how are you? So glad to be here. Can you hear me okay, Vicki?
Yes, you're great.
Good.
Go for it.
All right, so we're starting our presentation today about our triple win here at San Antonio College using experiential learning. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with experiential learning, and you may wonder, I'm sorry, my name is Karen Briere, presenting with Lee LeBlanc, our director here at San Antonio College. So with experiential learning, we consider it a triple win because it's not just students who are coming away from a project with career readiness skills, but our faculty members are given an opportunity to create curricular assignments that have real world applications, and it helps them in their presentation for their students. And of course, it's always a win for the library when we can work with our students, and I'll talk about that a little bit further. So when we first began thinking about experiential learning, we were considering, what does that mean for the library? I mean, we often think about ourselves as being kind of insular and not a part of the core curriculum, but experiential learning is rooted in learning through doing. And students can get a better grasp of transitioning their skills in the classroom to the career field when they have a real world project. So we thought about how can we make this happen for the library? How can they create a transitional skill for themselves and incorporate the library? So we came up with a library poster project. So as you know, we're all in the business of marketing and promoting ourselves, and we're always needing materials to do that. So I approached our professor in the communications department, Professor Brooke Rosser, about utilizing this project in her design communication 1 and 2 classes. So we started in Design Com 1, And then we transitioned from the fall to the spring with the DesignCom 2 students as well. So we started in 2018. At that time, Professor Rosser was using a theoretical project for her students. They would create an advertisement for a theoretical grocery store where they would create advertising materials for, say, the special of the week or what's on sale, or something for produce or something for different parts of the grocery store, hypothetical grocery store. So we took this from the theoretical to the reality. So by becoming their client, the library was the client and the students were our advertising firm or our marketing firm. So this is our first year, 2018, with DesignCom 1 and 2. And we created this partnership. We went to the class. We told them what our need was, what our expectations were, as far as, what do we want to promote? What do we require to be a part of the design, whether it be colors or fonts or sizes and shapes, and what did we want to accomplish? So we wanted to have not only a poster to be utilized throughout the library, a newspaper ad that could go into the student newspaper, and bookmarks that we could hand out to our students. So we had, in our first year, there were 10 students in the class. And they knew going in that we would choose our top 3, first, second, and third place. And those posters were printed and put throughout the campus. Every bookmark that was designed was printed. So everyone got to have their materials printed in some way. So after we gave them the parameters for the project, then they were required to not only create the designs, but they came to the library, they posted all of their things on presentation boards, and they had to present their ideas to the class and to the library staff. So they talked about, why they came up with the design that they used, the colors that they used, and all of these were a part of that course curriculum that they could apply to our project. So once they were done, because we were going to be printing these materials, there were some revisions that needed to be made, whether it be spelling errors or, the wrong floor or the hours. So they made those revisions, and when they were done, they were able to add these to their student e-portfolios. So what did the students think? Well, they absolutely loved it. They had so much fun with it. They would call me on the phone and say, what do you think about this? What did you want for that? What is, the color? What is this requirement? And they said that they learned so much from the experience because it felt like they were actually working at a design firm. And they were very, very grateful for that opportunity. So what did the library receive? Well, we received a product for marketing our services. The bookmarks were printed and the top 3 posters were printed and placed throughout campus. The cost to the library was very minimal. I think we spent less than $200 in the printing of these materials. So these are some of their winning posters that we have had throughout the year since 2018. As you can see, they're very creative. They think of things that we never would. They've got skills beyond skills, right? So we're very, very proud of the work that they do. And all of these are displayed throughout our library. So we continue to grow the project. So initially we started in 2018. They did the poster, the bookmark, and the newspaper ad. Then of course the pandemic happened in 2020. And so we moved from a bookmark that we weren't able to hand out, right? Because there was no students on campus. And we asked them to create a social media banner for use on our social media. And then in 2020, in the spring, we asked our students to do the same poster project in the fall for DesignCom 1. And then when those same students moved into DesignCom 2 in the spring, we asked them to create a logo for the Library Common Read. And then the next year, we increased that again, the poster project in the fall, and a new thing we call the Super Secret Study Spaces promotion in the spring. So this is what we used during the pandemic. These are all digital and used on our social media. So you can see that they had certain requirements for how large and the size and the shapes and what could be used on our Facebook banner. So they took their poster design and kind of tweaked it with the same theme and colors to be used for social media. The following year, as I mentioned, the Library Common Read was our goal was to create a new logo to be used for the Library Common Read. We required them to give us different colors so that we could use it either in black and white, in multiple different colors, and in different orientations. So those were made to be printed on materials of different kinds. So whether it be a tote bag or something as small as a USB. So they had some really clear design issues to deal with, and it was a real challenge for them, and they enjoyed it. So this year, we moved to asking our DesignCom 2 students to create a folder to promote our study spaces here on campus. Throughout the library, we also got some new study pods. And these folders, we had some really great designs. Our #1 winner was printed and is being given to students here on campus for our new student orientation. So they've been really great passing those out to all of our new students and promoting the library. So if you have ever considered doing an experiential learning project, I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. The students love it. They come away, not with just career readiness skills, but something that they can put on their resume and their e-portfolios. And, they just really enjoy having something that they can take away and put on their resumes. So even if they're not the winner, they still have a project that they can use to promote themselves to future employers. If you have any questions for me, please reach out. My director, Lee LeBlanc, can answer any questions, or myself, my number and my email. So thank you.
Thank you, Karen. That was great. And now we're going to move right into our last presentation for this section of the meeting, and that's going to be Erin Cassidy. She's from the University of Incarnate Word, and her presentation this morning is when is it wine o'clock when you WFH, work from home? Erin, welcome.
Hello, let me share my screen so that I can show you my little PowerPoint. And I never use PowerPoints, so I hope it works okay. All right. So when I first started thinking about what I could present, or I actually tried to convince a coworker to present, was what could we talk about that would sort of bridge what happened during the pandemic when we had to go into lockdown, and what were things that worked and did not work. And the name of the presentation is actually from Kelly, and that's and we kept it because why not? So what happened during lockdown? Well, I don't know about y'all, but what happened to us was we didn't know how to set policies on physical items. We just sort of turned around and left, grabbed our computers and went home and tried to sort it out, when we got there. So what really ended up happening for me was that I have little kids, or young kids, and I sort of became on duty all the time because I was at home. And in a lot of ways, I was just thankful that I had a job where I could do it at home. And so if something came up, I wanted to be on it all the time. So what ended up happening with our physical items too was that our director of public services said, hey, I can just go to campus whenever anybody needs something, and we'll if somebody, let's say somebody needs a book, and we'll sort it out. And all of that stuff becomes totally unsustainable regarding your policies and habits. So now, God forbid, we would ever go into lockdown again, but now we know better, at least, how to handle that sort of situation. However, some things we can learn for moving forward. And I found this little graphic, and I do have a bibliography at the end, which is partly why I have the PowerPoint, about what happens when you don't have boundaries, because that is what happened for me, at least during the pandemic, that during the lockdown part of trying to be all things to all people all the time, including my family and work. And so this really spoke to me. You sacrifice your own needs because people are infringing upon you and you don't stop it. And then their expectation is that that's going to continue because that's the way things work. That is really the way things work. So that if you have to stop this kind of a cycle, or else it's going to continue. And so this is something that I have learned, that I learned for myself, and wanted to share it with you today, that it is where I have ended up realizing that if I set this kind of a boundary continuing forward, then if I do go into a position where I work from home, that I can have those boundaries set up. And it's also a good idea for every day, for when you're not in lockdown. So what have we learned? Well, what have I learned? I learned that I have a place, that you establish your place. Luckily now it's hopefully not at home all the time. Do things like removing Outlook from your phone, because I check it. And sometimes when you're a director, I realize that's really hard because you're responsible for all of the things. But at least set yourself some hours where you don't do it. You don't check email or voicemail or your phone. Try to set up those types of boundaries too. And where you have time off, that is actually time off. Take breaks during the day, because even if you're not a slave. You are not a you're not an automaton. Even if you feel like, no, I'm fine. Take breaks during the day. It will help your mental health. It really, really will. And also know your work style. I think that I finally figured out, working at home, what my work style is. And I don't know what you call it, but what it is I collect all of it in my head. I collect everything, collect it all in my head, and I'm thinking. So even though my output does not look like I'm doing anything, at some point I will go and brain dump. I have to turn it all inside my head, and then I will brain dump. So knowing that about myself means that I need to have time where I'm uninterrupted to write my little notes and think and turn it all around in my head. And then I can associate with people. And then later on, I'm going to need to have that time where I sit and I just dump it all out and produce something. It's okay to say no. Practice doing that. And this is probably because the lockdown exposed things about my boundaries and an inability to set boundaries and an inability to say no to the point where I had to. So these are all ways that you can set boundaries where it's going to be, help you be healthier in the long run. So I found two really interesting articles. One of them is the one that contained that graphic, and the other one was actually an academic article. I know these aren't proper citations, but I'm among friends. What I thought an interesting phrase was that boundaries mean that not setting boundaries means that you're responsive to others' needs and expectations at the expense of one's own. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to set it up so that because somebody's infringing on yours, and it's okay to say no, and it's okay to set those boundaries, because once you're in a situation where there are no rules, like lockdown, that all gets exposed. And even during a lockdown, it's okay to say no. This is what I've learned. So my presentation wasn't really about wine, but I think that we all can maybe remember going back into lockdown and realizing, what is my schedule here? What am I doing? And that is why it's called Wine O'Clock. All right. Thank you. I don't know if I was shorter or longer or what.
Well, you had about 2.5 minutes left.
Usually I don't have any trouble talking.
But it was great. Thank you. So we're going to open it up for questions. And I had one favor for you, Erin. Could you put those 2 resources links into the chat for us? That would be, I can do that. That'd be great. Thank you.
Right.
And then I had a question for Gabriel about the graphic novels. Did you get special money for this collection, or did you just, it was just the decision was made to use part of the library materials budget to create your graphic novels collection?
Yeah, so we do have a separate fund line for getting materials for our print collections, and Popular already had a line for that. And so basically what I'm doing is trying to split that Popular budget kind of in half. So I'm getting some print materials and then also some graphic novels as part of that, just to facilitate those students.
So you basically siphoned money you already had to this specific format.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else have questions? I see one here in the chat. Gabriel, do you have a different loan period for graphic novels than for your other circulating book collection?
No, it's still the same policy for graphic novels as it is for everything else. And we also have, we also encourage students, we are right now, as part of our policy, we've added graphic novels to our collection development policy. So we're only getting like volume 1 of any long running series. So I'm not spending money like getting all the Batman that's out there. So we're also encouraging students to use ILL, and then also going on to Hoopla with the Bibliotech Digital Library, because it's another great one. Right now, it depends on graduate students and undergraduate students. Generally, it's about 2 to 3 weeks for the loan period. And of course, faculty gets a little bit longer for that. And we have had some faculty checkouts.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question also for Gabriel. I'm sorry that we're picking on you, but
no, I'm ready. Bring it on. This is my favorite subject, so I'm okay.
I just wondered if you have already, or if you are planning to evaluate the collection in terms of loss or theft.
This is a great question. Since it's still really new, we can kind of keep an eye and make sure that things are still there. But this is also an issue. I also serve on the ALA Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable, and I'm on the committee to address bans. And this is something that we brought up as part of like a passive problem in libraries, is people actually taking out comics and graphic novels that they may disagree with and just taking them from the library collection. So definitely doing any kind of shelf checks is always a really good idea. But for right now, we really haven't had that issue.
Thank you. And then your placement of them, are they within sightline? Is your collection within a sightline of, say, the circulation desk? Because our collection is still within the general collection, and it is out of my sight line.
Yes, actually, because we had to move it because it was larger than we had anticipated, it's actually right next to the circulation desk. And we just cleared out some space on our second floor, so we'll probably be developing a separate reading area for popular and graphic novels, but those will be within inside of the circulation desk as well.
Here's another question in the chat. This one is for Andrew. Can you speak to how you rolled out the pre and post surveys? Can't hear you. Cannot hear you.
Sorry, how about now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So one of the things that we did when they registered through Zoom, we got that contact information. And so when we had that contact information with their email and their names and everything else, we were able to email those students the pre-survey. Then after completion of the citation workshop, I immediately sent via chat the link to the post survey. And so the post survey, once again, required their name, some sort of identification, so that we could match up the pre-survey with the post survey and to get an understanding of where that student was before and after.
And then another question for Andrew. Is the citation workshop tutorial using LibWizard only available to the students who attended the workshops or to everyone?
It's actually available to everyone, and I can actually just paste a link to our LibGuide here. I'll paste it in the chat there. And you'll see a tab there on the left side of the screen. It'll say citation tutorial. And so the goal of that is that the students can kind of walk through that on their own. And if they have any questions specifically towards those, it'll kind of help answer those questions. And we also have our link to our chat as well. So if they have any side questions that they may not be able to find or answer, they can definitely use our chat to get a hold of us, answer any of those questions.
Any other questions, y'all?
I had a question for Gabriel. I think he mentioned ebooks. Does he have, what's the availability for ebooks, and do you have some ebooks for the graphic novels collection?
That's a great question. Currently, we do not have access just because the main source to use that would be either Hoopla or Overdrive, which is kind of cost prohibitive for us.
Right.
But right at the turn, right as the campus was closing, I reached out to Bibliotech, and we kind of worked with them to allow our students that are in San Antonio to use Olu's street address to register, so that they can have access to that. So that's kind of our main, and we haven't heard the word to stop doing that, so we're just going to continue.
Yes, that is exactly what you do.
I mean, until I get that cease and desist order,
Right.
you know. But that has been a wonderful outlet for us because since we're also offering streaming services, like streaming videos, if it's something we can't afford for Canopy, or if a student is requesting just to look at once, we can kind of direct them to the Bibliotech and to looking at Hoopla and to also looking even with Canopy through them. So it's kind of a great side hustle.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions today? So I'm just going to throw one thing in about our citation workshops. Here at the Alamo Colleges, we all are participants in the 40X system, where we do wildly important goals every year and semester. And this semester, NLC chose the library's WIG, our goal, to be the one that's going to be presented to the district board at the board meeting in July. So yay us. So it's definitely, I'm excited about these citation workshops because it's a real measurable way to see if we're making a difference. And that it's kind of nice to be able to actually show, hey, we're making a difference. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Anybody else? Well, Lee, I think we're done with this.
Yeah, we've got a.
And thanks to the four of you, they were all, I found them all really interesting. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I think it's true to be said that a lot of interesting work going on in each of our libraries, a lot of different problems being tackled, a lot of different ways library services are being implemented. Just a lot of work out there. And then even Erin's presentation is a good reminder about work boundaries and balancing your day out. And at the Alamo colleges, they I forget if they just hired or if it was, I think it was just before the pandemic, they hired the wellness officer or that position. So with all the work that everybody's doing and all these projects that we take on, there really is something to be said about making sure you're trying to balance your workout in some way, shape, or form. I know folks in this field, in our domain, we tend to work a lot. So there's research out there about the silent stresses in the library profession, because everybody thinks we just sit around and read books, right? And that we work in air conditioning all day long. But there's financial pressures, patron pressures, political pressures now. So we're seeing a lot of more exposure, I think, to the pressures that libraries are put under. So yeah, a lot of interesting work and very relevant and timely presentations. We are back at 10:30. So I think if you want a little bit of a morning break here, stretch your legs, catch up on some emails, respond to your boss, that kind of thing. Let's go ahead and take a little break. We'll leave the room open, just mute, go off video, of course, and come back a little early. We got our 10:30 session, Making Virtual Meetings Inclusive, Exploring Equity Gaps. It's Dr. Clara Smith. So that also looks to be a very interesting session. She's got a wide-ranging bio and seems to have a deep background in this area. So I think that'll be a really interesting session. Erin, were we gonna attempt to play a little music at this time too, to just kind of, yeah.
Let me go.
You don't want the music, you can always just
Load it up.
volume down.
And
And then I'll run the countdown timer too, so that
okay.
folks know when to get back here. I almost said good afternoon. That's how fast my day is going. So good morning. We have Dr. Clara Smith with us. As you can see, she's a diversity and inclusion training and development specialist at the University of Colorado Boulder. So her PhD is in educational equity and cultural diversity from CU Boulder. Also an adjunct faculty at the School of Education at CU, elected on the staff council, board secretary and DEI educator for nonprofit organization Medicine Horse in Boulder County, Colorado. So I think to sum that up, we have an excellent facilitator with us this morning for making virtual meetings inclusive and exploring equity gaps. We'll be having meetings like this on into the future, and inclusivity and equity is on everybody's radar. Big push here at the Alamo colleges to learn and get well versed in this work and understanding these needs. So really wanted to extend a warm welcome from Coral to Dr. Clara Smith, and I'd like to turn it over to you now.
Thank you very much. It's such an honor to be here today. Again, my name is Clara Smith, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. I will go ahead and get started, but I just want everyone to know that if at any point you have a question or a comment, please feel free to either raise your hand if you'd like, or just hop off mute. So let us get started. So I always start my presentations with a land acknowledgement, and this particular land acknowledgement is a personal one. It does have 3 parts. So first, it is not, and it shouldn't be, a check the box activity. It's actually a commitment to educate myself and to learn about the personal connections that I have with Indigenous lands. It's also a commitment for me to share with others what I've learned about both land acknowledgements and about the Indigenous people that lived on the land where I work and live, which is land within the territories of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho nations. The second part is to acknowledge that forced removal of Indigenous folks has caused some pretty devastating impacts to the Indigenous peoples. And then the third part is about reparations. And since I can't give the land back, I can do my part by including a land acknowledgement in my email signature. And in there, I have a link that encourages folks to donate to the White Antelope Memorial Scholarship Program at CU along with me. So here on this slide, you'll see a couple of pictures. The first one is Chief Niwot, and he is famous for the curse of Chief Niwot on the Boulder Valley. And that meant that anyone who saw the beauty of the Boulder Valley would want to stay, but their staying would be the undoing of the beauty. And if anyone is familiar with Boulder, it is a very beautiful area. The second picture is of Valmont Butte, which is an important Native American spiritual site. It was overtaken by European settlers and mining pollution. This is very close to the farm where I grew up in Boulder. My parents still live on the farm. It's also where my grandparents are buried because they were early settlers in Boulder. So they were allowed to be buried at the historic graveyard at the top of this mountain. And it's also the resting place and burial grounds for Native Americans. So very interesting juxtaposition there. All right, so for today, we have a few tips that will help us have a successful day. And if there's anything that we can do to help you make this as accessible as possible, please let me know. You did get the opportunity to get a participant guide. It is a fillable PDF. We also have a Word document guide that is screen reader friendly. So please let us know if you need that. You can probably private message Lee, I believe, or Emily. So either one, let us know. You can leave your cameras off today as needed. I know that having them on helps with engagement, but it's not a requirement. I do encourage you to take care of your needs. Please, send us questions if you'd like, and if you have a need to raise your hand, please do so. And also, you are able to change your name in your little Hollywood square if you'd like. So let me tell you what you can expect from today. So this will be hopefully an interactive space with the opportunity to talk to others in a breakout room later. You can also chat your thoughts or raise your hand. I've included some participation guidelines that are borrowed from Dr. Brene Brown in your guide on page 2. I really love her work, and she's a great champion for diversity, equity, and inclusion. You will get ideas if you are a meeting organizer, and you'll also get ideas on how to be an inclusive participant. The types of meetings that we will cover will vary from one-on-ones. They can be regular, small, or large meetings. They can be one-offs. They might be presentation style or even webinar style. And I've included some activities that you can do on your own time. And I'm going to be giving you a lot of information today. So the idea is not really to make everything happen during the next hour, but I'm hoping that this will plant some seeds. All right, so without further ado, let's get started. And also, just so you know, I'm getting over a cough. So if I put myself on mute unexpectedly, it's because I need to cough, and I just never know when that's going to come up. So, all right. So the first thing I'd like to do is to get us all thinking about why it's important to have inclusive virtual and hybrid meetings. And what I'd like for everyone to do is to reflect for a moment in your guide and answer 1 or 2 questions. And you can write down your thoughts in your guide, or you can even throw them in the chat, whichever way works best for you. So the 2 questions are, why do you think it's important to have inclusive virtual and hybrid meetings? Or you can recall a moment when you felt excluded in a virtual or hybrid setting. So I'm going to give you just a moment to reflect on that. If anyone has any questions, please let me know. And if you don't have your guide, also let us know. Thanks. All right. So again, feel free to share some of your thoughts in the chat. And I will share my own list now. So here's a list of reasons why it's important to have inclusive meetings. Feel free to scan through this list for a moment, jot down any that you hadn't thought of already in your guide. And I'd like to highlight a couple of reasons that stick out for me. So virtual and hybrid meetings are inclusive, then it really helps to mitigate the power dynamics you might sometimes see when you have people from different roles in one space, like students, staff, faculty. And the other big reason for me is that conversation cues are really hard to pick up in the virtual space, especially if your camera is off. So real world conversations are rich, they're multifaceted. You can catch meaning in people's eyes and their body language. And I'm an advocate for not requiring people to keep their cameras on during virtual meetings, but I do try to ask people to consider the impact of having the camera off. So the impact that it has on the speaker or the facilitator of a meeting, not being able to have that instant feedback of people, nodding their heads in agreement, or maybe if they have a look of confusion, that will help prompt the speaker to clarify. And also, it's really hard to build community if everyone comes to a virtual or hybrid meeting with their cameras off and muted, and it makes you feel like you are not in a community. So those are just some thoughts there. Let me look at the chat here real quick. So some ideas, because it's the right thing to do, yes. Kelly says it makes meetings less stressful, absolutely. Also, I remember a time when I had to do a conference call into a Zoom meeting. I'd done so many Zoom meetings that I felt lost without being able to see faces. Really brought to mind how much vision matters and how much losing one of your senses could affect you. Yes, I like that. Bryant said, so everyone can learn and gather the information they need. Great. Lisa said some people actually like the isolation. Absolutely, yes. And the history of this workshop began before the pandemic, and I would help folks with inclusive meetings. It was just inclusive meetings. And of course, the pandemic pushed us into this virtual world, and so it's really evolved throughout. So something that you can expect throughout this presentation is that I will be sprinkling in tips for inclusive practices. So I'll start those now with your first 2 tips. And also I've included all of the tips that I will go over at the back of your guide in a list form. So know that they are all included there. So for the first tip, the first tip is to be present, both as a facilitator and as a participant. Try not to allow yourself to multitask. You're giving your brain a break by doing this, and the cognitive load that is necessary to multitask is really hard. As a participant, if you need to move around with your computer, say you have your laptop, my recommendation is just to turn your camera off during that time, because it's distracting for both the facilitator and for other participants. And to be an inclusive participant, be prepared for the meeting. So you will be more valuable if you are prepared. If you need to build in time to prepare, hold some time before a meeting to make sure that you have that time. And then the next tip is to mind the mute. So write yourself a note if you always forget. Always assume that you are not muted before you start to talk to someone else in the room with you. And as a facilitator, if you have the Zoom settings correctly set, you can actually mute people that are not muted. So that's a lot less disruptive and awkward than asking all of the participants who are not muted to, hey, everyone, someone's not muted, to mute themselves. All right, so now that we've jump-started our thinking around virtual meetings, I'll share the goals of this training and what I hope you'll learn. And these are on page 4 of your guide. So by the end of this training, you'll be able to understand who's being excluded in virtual meetings. You'll be able to identify some equity gaps in virtual meetings. You'll be able to name some common barriers to inclusion, and you will be able to learn how to apply some strategies to mitigate these barriers. So here's some statistics on meetings. So I'm sure none of us are surprised that the COVID pandemic changed our world and the way we conduct meetings, and most people had to get acquainted with virtual meetings in a short amount of time. And also, not surprisingly, we ended up with more meetings in general. And so this information is from the National Bureau of Economic Research. And the implications are that we experienced a really wide range of inclusivity in virtual meetings. So before the pandemic, inclusion with in-person meetings was difficult. And now with the arrival of hybrid meetings, it makes it even more so. I have a link for some more video conference statistics, and I'll go ahead and throw those in the chat. You can save those if you'd like. All right. So some more facts on virtual meetings. So diversity experts say that because of the pandemic and the shift from the office environment to working from home, the virtual office space actually puts an undue burden on people of color. So they have fewer connections, they have less extensive networks than white colleagues to begin with. So Black and Hispanic workers can find themselves more isolated than ever in a world of Zoom calls and virtual forums. And this study in particular uses the word Hispanic, which means someone with a Spanish language background. And it's a term that's still used by the US Census Bureau. So what happens is that assignments end up going to people who look more like the top managers, who are typically white, while workers of color are more hesitant to speak up during online meetings. So the bottom line is that being visible for people of color is much harder when working from home because of the virtual settings. So here are some more tips for you. So try holding a Zoom room open maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes before, if it's a regular meeting, so that people who have the time can log in informally to chit chat with other early birds. And this is the equivalent of getting to an in-person room early, getting settled, saying hi to everybody, and making those really important connections with folks. And this can really help sense of belonging, can help with a healthy mental state of mind. If you do this, make sure that you communicate that you'll do it, and also check your Zoom settings to make sure that folks can do that. And then the second tip is specific to hybrid meetings. So if virtual folks will be presenting, someone should arrange to meet with them ideally 15 minutes before to test out their equipment. And if you have any activities, make sure that you test them out so that they are appropriate for both physical and virtual participants. So let's explore some of the ways that folks are being excluded in virtual meetings. And we're on page 5 of your guide if you want to follow along and take notes. So those are the folks that were marginalized in settings before COVID. So due to a number of reasons, these people might be feeling unsure about their presence in meetings. They might be holding back because of historical marginalization. When we moved into the virtual setting, they're still feeling marginalized, but even more so. And just as we were getting used to an all virtual setting, we're moving into yet another new situation, which is the hybrid model. So the hybrid model for me is the most difficult situation to have inclusivity. And throughout this presentation, you will understand why. But it's mostly because we have, folks that are in the virtual space are the ones that actually get sort of left out, because the folks that are in the physical space are present. They can, see each other. And then sometimes the virtual folks might get, lost without a person that is actually helping them. So other ways that folks are being excluded is they may not have the proper technology or access to sufficient internet bandwidth. Okay, so the bandwidth issue is really important to talk about, because oftentimes, like at the university, we have great internet, and some folks at home may not have really great bandwidth, or they may have to share it with others in the household. And then folks also get excluded when they have to juggle household duties and work if they're working from home. And in the past couple of years, we've been affected by a number of social justice issues. And unfortunately, we've had a lot of folks whose mental health is being affected by so many reasons. We've had, fires, we've had shootings, we've had insurrections, we've had Supreme Court issues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's important to note that there can be a lot of hidden trauma that people are experiencing. All right, so for your next tips, find the right time to meet virtually and set those times well in advance. Having frequent last-minute cancellations are not inclusive. People have to oftentimes carefully plan their schedule so that they are able to be, on camera in a meeting, and also keep it short. Encourage people to stay switched on, but maybe for a shorter amount of time. And then also share the materials in advance. People can print materials if necessary. Oftentimes it helps with Zoom fatigue. It helps folks prepare questions, and ultimately it is more efficient. And for the hybrid space, having a designated point person in the physical space will attend to all the messages, all the tech needs that are needed for the virtual space. The person can chat things to the virtual folks, like the names of those people that are attending in person. When I was in a staff council meeting, one of the first hybrid meetings that we had, I chose to be in the virtual space, not because I wanted to be there, but because I wanted to test out, some of the issues that were happening in the hybrid space. And I realized that I was getting so used to being able to see everyone's name in the Hollywood squares. And it was really, I felt sort of not in touch with the folks that were in the physical space, because they showed up in their own little Hollywood Square, tiny, tiny, tiny people, you know, that you could see in the square, but you couldn't see who was there. You didn't know, you know, what their names were, what their pronouns were, anything. So that is kind of one of the disadvantages of having that in the hybrid space. All right, so now that we know the ways that some people are being excluded, let's talk about the implications of inclusive virtual meetings. And we're on page 6 now of your guide. So this is really important for sense of belonging. So making sure that people feel included in the virtual space is really important, no matter what their role is on campus. And virtual meetings are helping many people, you know, some folks that are not able to physically get to a space. But if it's not conducted inclusively, it is hurting many folks who are already feeling marginalized. And inclusive meetings helps retention and persistence. Whether a person feels welcome and included in meetings is really part of their overall ability to do well in their job or in school. And it really directly impacts their desire to continue in their job role or position. And then lastly, it's important to consider some of the concerns of an online presence. So we can ask ourselves, what are the implications when we ask folks to show their video during virtual meetings, for example? So for some, asking people to turn on their videos in their own homes can put their privacy at risk, especially if they don't have a lot of options in their homes for taking meetings. Some examples are that they may have foster children, and there are rules around having foster children be seen online. They may be living in poverty. They may be, you know, going through some things that we aren't, you know, aware of. So virtual backgrounds like I have right now, these are the Flatirons from Boulder. They don't always work for folks. Okay, so that's not always a solution as well. So the takeaway from this is to really connect with people that you serve online and see how you can best support them. So here are some more tips. So sense of belonging tips in a hybrid situation where some folks are remote. Invite those people to share their questions or their comments to first to ensure that no one's comments are left unheard. You might try using a shared document to capture notes or questions. And then also team recognition, making sure that you acknowledge people's efforts, no matter their location, is really important. So now that you know the implications, let's take a moment to reflect. Why is this important to you? And how does this impact your work, if at all? So we are still on page 6 of your guide. And I've heard a couple of arguments against needing to think about inclusive meetings. And the first argument is, I understand it's important, but I don't know how. So first of all, give yourself credit for showing up in this space here today. You'll learn about some barriers and how to mitigate them. And also there are many resources that are now available to learn how to make meetings inclusive. On our campus, we have digital accessibility, we have universal design for learning, best practices for socially distanced learning. There are Zoom tutorials, Teams tutorials. If you are familiar with the Crucial Conversations trainings, we have those, and those are really important, those skills to learn. I have a lot of links for resources that are in your guide today. So I'll be going over a lot of stuff. We won't be able to get into all the details for every single resource, but the idea is just to get connected. So Lisa has a comment in the chat. How do you feel about not recording meetings so people feel more comfortable? That's a great question. I think that it's important to make sure that everyone who's in the meeting understands, you know, the reason or why it will be recorded, and have everybody be on board. I agree. Sometimes it does make people more comfortable, especially when we're talking or having conversations about, you know, sort of sensitive issues. I kind of prefer not to have it be recorded, like especially when we have like breakout rooms, and usually those aren't recorded anyway. I don't mind being recorded myself because I'm just used to it, but it's, you know, I agree that it just depends. I guess it's a context is really matters on that. So thanks for that question. So the second argument is, I understand it's important, but I don't have the time. So my answer to that is this, that if a person takes the time to learn how to be inclusive once, then you can start to incorporate those strategies in your future meeting design. It just gets easier, right? And also consider the amount of time that it takes for those that are most affected by meetings that are not inclusive, and what they have to do to ensure that they are included in conversations. It's important for all of us to make the time to learn some key inclusive practices. So on page 6 of your guide, I'd like for you to take maybe 30 seconds to reflect. In what ways is this important to you? And how do virtual meetings impact your work, your team, yourself? You know, ask yourself, are they mostly inclusive? Are they not inclusive? So go ahead and just take a few moments to reflect. But before you actually start that, I'm going to share a few more tips. So if you find that your meetings don't feel inclusive, try to go meta, okay? Try to restructure your approach to meetings. And this can be part of your reflection. While you think of the impacts that meetings have on your work and your team or yourself, try to use a growth mindset approach and explore ways that you can build community online. So part of restructuring your approach is to revisit the purpose. So you can think, is the purpose of the meeting to solve a problem? Is it to make a decision? Is it to build community? Those are really important things to keep in mind. You also might borrow the flipped classroom model and use that for your meeting structure. So give people stuff to digest first, maybe a shared Google document to grapple with issues first, and then have a meeting to have a more meaningful time together. Okay, I'm going to put myself on mute and give you just a moment to reflect. All right. Yeah, Kelly wrote, that's a difficult question. Many people rely on recorded meetings if they can't make it live for whatever reason. Yeah, I agree. But one of the issues I think about is just the recording itself. Sometimes people feel a little bit, I don't know, just a little bit worried about that. I also think about, like, in a in-person meeting, we don't normally have people being recorded live. You know, we don't have a camera on the in-person meeting, like if there's not the hybrid situation. There'll be meeting minutes and such, but it is sort of a weird thing for some folks, right? Let's see here. I have some more things in the chat. I've attended sessions where the presentation was recorded, but the Q&A wasn't, so people felt a bit more comfortable speaking openly. I thought that was a considerate option. Yeah. Okay, that's great. And then Kelly said, virtual meetings make my work easier because I can take care of things on the side if I need to. Unfortunately, not all meetings are useful, and virtual helps to mitigate that. So that goes back to my comment about, like, thinking going meta and thinking about whether the meeting needs to happen at all. We just really need to be mindful of whether it can be an email or be a meeting, right? Erin, I'm the liaison to the distance program, so I conduct a lot of IL sessions online and have to record them. Students in asynchronous courses can't be required to attend the synchronous session, so I hide participants and tell them to use chat for questions if that's more comfortable for them. Definitely don't require they show their pictures. Great. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, there's so many different ways to approach this. So I appreciate everyone's thoughts. That I love learning about other ideas from you all. So here's another important reason. So at CU Boulder, as a university staff employee, our performance plans are based on different competencies, and one of them is called inclusive excellence. The definition for inclusive excellence on our campus is exemplifying excellence through diversity by creating a welcoming and inclusive environment that maximizes the success and inclusion of all students, staff, and faculty. And the reason why I keep this as in my presentation, even when I don't, when I'm not at CU, is that the list itself is really a great list. So I've listed the 8 key behaviors here on the slide. They're also in your guide on page 7. I think they're very transferable to a lot of things, and that's why I keep that. So before I move on, let me look at the chat again. Lisa said it came up with a conversation on gun violence and people feeling free to discuss their views. Yeah, there's a lot of things that folks will not be as open if they are being recorded. Yeah, thanks for that. So I'd like to take a moment for you all to think about these key behaviors I was talking about around inclusive excellence independently for a moment. Try to reflect on how to make direct connections from these key behaviors to specific behaviors in your job duties. You can use the self-assessment that I have on page 8 of your guide to help you, but I also encourage you to do this on your own time. And ask yourself, how can I make direct connections to these key behaviors? How often do I exemplify these behaviors? And which ones do I recognize as an opportunity for growth, and which ones are strengths? So what questions can I answer about this independent reflection for just a few moments? All right, I'll just take a moment to let you reflect. All right, I know that wasn't a lot of time, but this guide is for you to keep. So if you want to come back to this and continue to do your reflection, that would be great. So thank you for doing that reflection. This will really help us to connect to inclusion in the virtual space. So let's talk about the first barrier, and that is the equity gap in virtual meetings and how we can learn to see that gap. We're on page 9 of your guide now. So the first thing we can do is accomplish this by collaborating. So asking a colleague to have a second look at documents or meeting plans really goes a long way in ensuring that there are not any barriers to inclusion. And learning how to find those gaps really takes time and commitment. And if you partner with people that are open to collaboration, then this process really becomes easier. And collaborating is super important because it helps us learn to look for new perspectives. So what I do is I call this an accountability partner. So that would be the first way that we can learn to see the gap. The next is, how do we elevate the unconscious things? So taking time to reflect on things that we've always done in a certain way and ask ourselves how this might be affecting people in ways that we don't know. So let me give you an example. So what about having a standing meeting every Monday morning? So elevate the underlying reason. Is it because it's really necessary, or is it because we've always done it that way? Are you doing this to ensure that people are sort of on task or at work? Ask yourself if this is putting undue pressure on some folks. And then the last tip for the equity gap in virtual meetings is to check your own bias. So in your guide, I've included a number of implicit bias tools and resources that you can check out on your own time. Unconscious bias training is something that's really worth doing on a regular basis. It's really an important step in the commitment to learning how to see the equity gaps. I do an implicit bias training for our campus. And what I like to do is just really highlight how all of these patterns that we've been given throughout our lifetime in our society really affects how we think about things in ways that we don't even know that we're doing. And so that's the key there about implicit bias. And then also just checking your own assumptions. Check your assumptions about the technology that people have, their equipment, their availability. Again, talking about the crucial conversations training I really like a lot is ask yourself, what is the story I'm telling myself about this situation or this person, and challenge those assumptions that come up for you. So the next set of tips is try thinking of a virtual meeting as a long distance relationship with a friend. So how would you foster that relationship? How would you spend quality time together? And then the next tip is, try to balance the need to communicate and give each other space. So does it really need to be a meeting, or can you email the information? And then lastly, again, quality over quantity. If you are asking folks to meet online, make sure that it's really for a great reason and that you are prepared, you have an agenda, and that it's really worth people's time. And I've included an optional activity on page 9 of your guide that you can do on your own to help you with this first barrier, dealing with equity gaps. We're not going to do that right now. It's just an option for you to take a look at later. So the second barrier that we'll connect with today is this absence of a sense of belonging in a virtual space. So I recently read a book called War for Kindness. I'll put the name of the book in the chat for you right now. Let me just do that right now before I forget. This book presents a lot of research around empathy. And what I appreciated most is that the studies show that empathy can be learned. It's not a fixed trait. The author is Dr. Jamil Zaki. He's a professor of psychology at Stanford University. And he's also the director of the Stanford Social Neuroscience Lab. That was our last library common read. Awesome. It is a great book. A quote that stuck out for me from that book is that technology is the biggest threat to empathy. And that is at the core of why I like to do this training on virtual and hybrid meetings. So one way to foster empathy in the virtual world and sort of to mitigate that loss of sense of belonging is by having a set of meeting norms that help our meetings run smoothly. And this really allows for a lot of trust with each other. I'm always surprised by the fact that many departments and units on campus that I work with don't really have meeting norms that people can look to or contribute to. They're mostly unwritten, and people have to guess what the expectations and the norms are. And this is definitely not an inclusive way to conduct meetings when you have folks from different worldviews, different lived experiences, different cultural backgrounds. So let's take a moment, if you all would please chat in one example of a meeting norm that you've used in the past that has been successful for you. And your guide has a couple of examples to help you get started on thinking of ideas. And as you chat those ideas, also think about the ways that meeting norms can be helpful, allowing participants to co-create them. So not just a top-down approach, but really having some time to purposefully have everyone come together and address specific behaviors. You can set up a culture of accountability. It helps to review those as a group periodically to remind people of the norms, or maybe add new ones that seem to make sense. So if we have any ideas, please put those in the chat for everyone to look at. And while you're doing that, I'll go ahead and show you the next tips. So especially for large meetings, if possible, co-facilitate the meetings or have a producer. I normally have a producer that helps me, and she really helps to manage the chat. She helps with private questions if there's tech issues. She helps me ensure that comments don't get lost. She'll help me manage the wait room or the breakout rooms. And really all of those things, it doesn't seem like it adds up, but it really helps people feel included. It helps folks feel heard, and it helps with sense of belonging in the virtual space. And then the last tip is uplift voices. And what I mean by that is a lot of times women will say, or maybe folks who have been marginalized historically, they'll say that they often find themselves being talked over, ignored, interrupted, all these things. And if you notice that, as a participant, you can uplift their voices, their ideas. For example, you can say, can we go back to what Clara just said? She had a great idea about X, Y, and Z. So that is what I mean by uplifting voices. So I'm going to look at the chat and see what we have here. Angela, sharing a good for the group talk at the end of our staff meetings. That's great. I like that. Emmy, stating the purpose of the meeting and having an agenda, written or verbal, to accomplish the work of the meeting. Also clearly stating that I like to turn on my camera at the beginning of the meeting so I can be seen, but it isn't necessary for the other person. I have lots of virtual meetings with students. All right, great. Katie, wrap up by covering action items again. Yep. Anna Selling, quick social emotional learning check-ins at the start of meetings, usually simple with emojis. That's a great idea. It gives me a good indicator of how people are feeling that day. That can have an impact on how meetings go. Erin said, I like that. In librarian meetings, we all share what we're up to. We can use chat or speak. And then Emmy asked, Angela, what is a good for the group talk like, going over the group wins for the week? Great question. Those are all great. I will say that I remember when I was in a group, when I worked for a group on campus, back when I was still doing my doctoral work, when we had stand-up meetings every Monday, everyone would share what fun thing they did over the weekend. And I always just dreaded that question because my weekends were not fun while I was writing my dissertation. And so I always felt like it kind of put an undue pressure on myself. And I never shared in my thoughts about that, but it is something to think about. All right, thanks everyone for all those great ideas. So let's take a look at a list of more examples of meeting norms that might have been missed. So we have a few here on the slide. You know, having engagement guidelines like I shared with you from Brene Brown is a great idea. And let us take a look at some more tips. So like I mentioned before, it's really hard to see body language that's being communicated by Zoom, especially if someone's camera is off. So the tip is really always to assume the best of intentions. If you're in a meeting and you feel like there was something that you felt uneasy about, reach out to that person privately just to check in. Use your crucial conversation skills, like starting with heart, and let that person know that the story you're telling yourself is that you noticed that there might have been some concern on their part or some uneasiness in the meeting or whatever. All right, let me just check okay. The answer was, what is going good for you that week, whether personal or professional, something that you were enjoying or thought the group might need to know. Yeah, that's awesome. Like my good for the group statement for today would be my looking forward to a half price shake at Sonic today after work. Ooh, that sounds yummy. It's making me thirsty. All right, so the third barrier that we'll talk about today in your guide on page 11 is this issue of people having to share space at home with their work and other family responsibilities. You know, we sometimes need to find a space where we live to conduct meetings without interruptions. Many folks have to shoulder added responsibilities like childcare or elder care during work hours when they're attending meetings virtually. I have a dog that lays next to me, next to my desk, and oftentimes he snores or he barks. And so that's something that I have to deal with. And now that we are sort of kind of emerging from the pandemic, you know, virtual and hybrid meetings have become a really efficient way for folks to meet. It's accessible to many, and if it's done right, is better for all. So a recent analogy that came to me from a book that I read last month called The End of Bias is this issue of accessible bathroom stalls. So who doesn't appreciate those stalls, right? Everyone does, because they're just better overall. So that's why it's important to foster an inclusive virtual and hybrid meeting space so that it is better for everyone. I'm going to go ahead and put the link to that book in the chat just because I really appreciated that book. So a mitigation strategy that can help is having open and honest communication with people and meeting them where they're at. This really helps to remove a barrier that many people are facing right now. So making sure that you are adjusting your expectations, this goes a long way in making people feel valued and included. If some people have household responsibilities that might hinder their job responsibilities, it's really important to work with them to find a solution that works best for everyone. So an example might be reserving certain hours of the day for meetings, or maybe having a day of the week where your team doesn't schedule meetings. I know for my team, we normally don't schedule meetings on Fridays. Sometimes that doesn't always work, but it really is just a nice way to sort of take a break. So to get you connected to what this strategy might look like, I've included another optional activity on page 11 of your guide. And this activity is asking you to think of a person who's either a staff or a student employee and check off any boxes that apply to that person. And if you don't have a direct report, which of these items actually pertain to you? Have you brought this up in your one-on-ones with your supervisor? And then how many items are you aware of that might hinder a person's ability to work effectively and efficiently online? So these are really important considerations to think about when scheduling meetings. And again, we're not going to do this today, but instead I would invite you to do this on your own time. And so for our next set of tips, try having webinar type meetings as well as meetings where everyone is sort of engaged. So mix it up. So that way people, you know, who if they know it's going to be a webinar type meeting, they don't have to worry about being sort of camera ready and they don't have to feel guilty about having their camera turned off. So Erin said, this is why I like closed captioning. It's good for a lot of people. Absolutely. I like it as well. And as a facilitator, if it is distracting for you, watching your words on the screen, I believe that you can turn that off. So now we're at our fourth and last barrier, and that is that people are feeling isolated and excluded in virtual meetings. We're on page 12 of your guide. So the mitigation strategy here is to consistently apply inclusive practices. So I'll go over several of these now fairly quickly. Please feel free to reach out to me by email if you need help understanding how to use any of these resources. I'm not going to go like step by step into each of these. I'm presenting them now as an overview to help you get connected to them. So the first one is to use correct name pronunciation. So why is it important to practice correct name pronunciation? So for most folks, if someone takes the time to ask for help with pronunciation, it signals respect, and it's really critical to them. So in order to have a sense of belonging in the workplace, making sure that you are always pronouncing people's names correctly is great. Because if you do pronounce a person's name incorrectly, whether you intentionally did it or not, it can have the effect of making people feel invisible. And on our campus, we use the LMS system Canvas, and we have a tool called Name Coach that's available to students and instructors. I will chat out the instructions on how to get Name Coach if you're not connected to it with by campus. And just give me 1 second. It's kind of long, so let me just go ahead and chat this for you all. Feel free to copy this and go do this if you'd like. I have a button on my email signature that allows me to let folks know how to pronounce my name. And if you might be saying to yourself, well, my name is not hard to pronounce. Take a moment and ask yourself, for whom is it not hard to pronounce? The more that we make people aware that this is a tool that we can use, the more it will become normalized. People, really feel a sense of belonging if we know their names. And hopefully those folks that have a name that gets mispronounced often will have a way to help others learn the pronunciation of their name and have more of a sense of belonging. So another inclusive practice is to help folks take the time to adjust their Zoom settings. On our campus, we have our instance. We go to the Zoom instance for CU Boulder. We log in, as we do with all the other things that we do on campus. We have a range of options to adjust your settings. You can change the way your name is displayed. So if your middle name shows up in Zoom and you just don't want it there, you can change it. You can add your pronouns so it shows up automatically every time you log into Zoom. I'll talk about pronouns more in a moment. You can add a phonetic spelling of your name. And so those are some of the options that you can use. The next inclusive practice is to use a land acknowledgement. So at the beginning of this training, I demonstrated how to use a land acknowledgement. And the reason we use this is to take the time to acknowledge that we are using land that belonged to Indigenous people, and it is land that was forcibly taken from them. Something that I learned not too long ago is that land acknowledgements are used among different tribes of Indigenous folks in the same way to honor and respect the land that they are in. I'll also share an article in the chat that sort of presents an argument against doing land acknowledgements and why they think that. It is a link from Inside Higher Ed, so you may not have access to it because of the paywall. I'm happy to send you a PDF if you have trouble. But the reason why I offer this counter argument is just to acknowledge that not everyone thinks land acknowledgements are effective. That is one of the reasons why I offer my personal land acknowledgement so that I can be more transparent about how and why I raise awareness about this. So let me go ahead and put that article in the chat for you. All right. So another mitigation strategy to help folks feel less isolated in the virtual space is to normalize sharing of pronouns. This helps people feel validated and included. Learning people's pronouns is important because we should never make assumptions about anyone's pronouns or their gender identities based on what they look like or their names. I will say just like a quick thing about they, them pronouns. They're used by some folks, but not all folks that use them, who don't want to have a binary gender associated with their pronouns. A great analogy that a person from the LGBTQIA community gave me is that when, for example, some women want to use Ms. instead of Mrs. so that they can, sort of keep their marital status private or whatever. So that is just one analogy, and it's just one perspective. And I don't think that everyone feels that same way, but it's just one way to understand it. Also, some folks from that community also say that using they, them pronouns is acceptable to use when you don't yet know someone's pronouns. I do have a guide around why pronouns are important. And it's called What You Need to Know About Pronouns, and it's in the back of your guide. There's a link to it. And the most important thing about pronouns is making sure that you don't require people to share their pronouns because they may not be comfortable in whatever situation or context they are in. All right, and the next tip is to use inclusive language, okay? The key here is our intention that we're taking steps in the right direction. What is inclusive language? I'll go ahead and put this definition from the Linguistic Society of America here in the chat. So according to them, inclusive language is language that acknowledges diversity, it conveys respect to all people, is sensitive to differences, and promotes equal opportunities. So for example, trying to avoid using gendered expressions like phrases like ladies and gentlemen, because then it makes it seem like only the folks who identify as men or women are important. We can say friends and guests, for example. And another thing that I'm trying out for myself is to not use you guys, which is really hard for me because I've been using it my entire life. But I'm trying to help myself unlearn these things that are commonly used because it's just my own personal journey to ungender my language. Another thing that I've been trying to do is making sure that I always, tell people what an acronym stands for instead of just assuming that they know. I also am trying to get rid of jargon because it's just not inclusive, because not everyone is familiar with that. And then if they feel sort of weird about asking what it means, then it's just not inclusive. And I will say that words matter. Yes, they do. But I also will say, please don't get too hung up on words because our language is constantly evolving. Give yourself a little bit of a break. And I also have an inclusive language toolkit. I will share that at the end in the chat for you. And I'm also working on a guideline that goes into more depth about what inclusive language is. So feel free to email me and I'll send it to you when it's done. Also in your guide is a link on how to check for inclusive language in Microsoft Word, and it is off by default, so you do have to turn it on. I'll put that link in the chat for you if you'd like to check it out. Let me know how it works out for you. So the two key ideas to help your language be more inclusive is to avoid making assumptions and respect unique experiences. And then the last inclusive practice is to reduce microaggressions. In your guide, there's a video link that explains what microaggressions are and how they affect folks. Learning about microaggressions and learning how to mitigate them is one last way that you can make virtual meetings inclusive. And microaggressions are more than just insults or insensitive comments or insensitive behavior. They are remarks, they're questions, they're actions that are really painful to hear or to experience for some folks, because it might have to do with a person's membership in a group that's discriminated against or maybe subject to stereotypes. And one key part of what makes them so problematic is that they happen a lot of times in casual conversation, in our casual meeting conversation, and often they're done without any harm intended. So that's why it's important to learn. And let me give you one quick example of what a microaggression is, in case you are still wondering. So for example, when an Asian American student is complimented by a professor for speaking perfect English, when it's actually their first language, that is a microaggression. So here's one more tip. So inclusive meetings are efficient meetings. So establishing little inclusive habits for long-term behavior change will go a long way. So you might consider building in some kind of accountability. If you're a meeting organizer, maybe a Google form with a simple question like, was this meeting worth your time today? And also along that vein, what are your specific meeting habits? Next time you're in a meeting, pay attention to those habits and make note of them. All right. So now we're at the point where I'd like to give you some time to talk with others about some of the strategies that you've learned about today. We will, with some help, we'll get some breakout room situated here. Let me see how much time we have. I say about maybe, let's say 12 or 13 minutes. Is that okay? And if we can, I think, Lee, if we can get the breakout rooms to be around 3 or 4 people, that would be a good amount of folks. I will say that if any of you feel like you are not in the space to be in a breakout room, please send a private message to Lee. His Hollywood Square name looks like Coral, C-O-R-A-L. And let Lee know that you just can't be in a space right now to discuss with others. Hopefully Lee can put you in a breakout room by yourself so that you just have some time to just think for a while, or you can just stay in the main room, whatever you'd like. This would be a good time for you to take a quick break if you need to use the restroom. The instructions are in your guide, but I'll also put them in the chat for you right now so that everyone has them. Just a minute. And so yeah, we will go ahead and get started doing that here in just a moment. One last tip for today is to create and use templates for your meetings. I've included some of those templates at the back of your guide just as an idea. And then also send a follow-up email. This is a great way to recap ideas and next steps, action items, all of those all in one spot, and mostly to thank people for their participation. Using a subject line also that makes sense rather than just using an old email will help as well. All right, I'm going to stop sharing while we are working on the breakout rooms. And how are we doing? Lee, are we ready for those?
Yeah.
Okay. I can also help if you want some help.
I got six rooms. You said about 4 people. The P's.
Yeah, 3 or 4. Yeah. And about, do you know how to use the timer on the options in the left-hand corner?
Yeah. Do you
Okay.
want them to auto close after a certain number of minutes?
Yeah, let's say 13 minutes, and then that way folks know they'll have the little timer so they can keep track of how much time is
Great. Okay.
left. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. One second.
It looks like they're not assigned.
Okay, yeah, give me 1 second. So we're-
I'm happy to do that for you if you'd like. And then folks, if you all need to take a quick break, give us a second to do this. Lee, let me go ahead and do that. I can do that really quickly
Yeah,
here.
I put auto assign.
Okay.
Hmm.
I'm going to go ahead and close them out and start
Sure.
over for a second, okay? Just a minute. I will do this.
Hmm.
And I'll put a timer. Looks like you did the timer, so that's great. All right. Okay, I've got it ready. So I'll go ahead and open up all the rooms for folks, and we'll see you back in about 13 minutes. Okay, it looks like some folks did not get assigned a room. I don't know how that happened. Are those folks that did not want to join the breakout room?
I only got 2 messages, but
Okay,
about folks not wanting to. So yeah, I'm not sure why it didn't automatically assign for me. It's weird.
okay. So Andrea, Andrew, Emily, Erin, Gabrielle, Karen, Vicky, I'm going to go ahead and put you in some rooms. So just a minute.
So,
Okay. Some of them are a little bit big, but that's okay.
yeah,
All right. Thank you so much.
yeah, absolutely. Gotta bring Vicky back. I just saw Vicky
Oh.
stay here.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. There was messages coming in and people were getting pushed out of view. So
Sorry about that.
yeah, no, it's fine.
Sorry, Vicky. We brought you back.
Yeah.
That's okay. I would participate, but I've got this personnel stuff going on that I apologize to you, that I just have to deal with.
That's okay. That's
Thank
not
you.
a problem. Yeah.
But I am
that's-
really, really enjoying this. I'm learning a lot. So thank you.
Great. That's great to hear. Thanks, Vicky.
Yeah. Okay. I'm
I have some private messages that came in, some questions. So I'm going to go ahead and answer
Sure.
those. And actually, I think I'll answer that question to the whole group when they get back because it's a really good question.
Cool. Very good. I like the word tip. Microsoft Word tip.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I like the Microsoft Word tip.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it is very cool.
I'm always tweaking things on my platform and I think I might have seen that a while back and not read up on it and was like, oh, I should look at that. Or is that maybe something that was introduced recently? Because I do quite a bit of
You
prior
know,
IT to my role, and so I'm always used to configure stuff, and I can't remember if I've seen that.
I think it came out last year. So
Yeah, it's pretty recent, huh?
mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's neat.
I know that I know a little bit about how to make Word documents accessible for screen readers. I'm definitely not an expert on that. And I'm not an expert at all on making PDFs accessible. I do sometimes need to get help with that, but so that's a little bit different than inclusive language on Microsoft Word, but it's all, great knowledge to
Yeah,
have.
it is, yeah. And the programs now like Word and Acrobat. Acrobat's been doing it a while, but like Word does it now. It'll actually read you the document. So some of the tools now that are like you were saying about the restroom stalls, there's just so much technology that is so beneficial for everybody across the board to make your work
Absolutely.
easier in the day. Yeah, it's really, I mean, you want to give your eyes a break. Outlook can read you the email, or Word can read you the email. I mean, it's really,
Mhm.
it's, we had Professor Zaki come and he was the speaker for our common read because we
Oh,
chose
nice.
the book,
Yeah.
and we were able to book him as a speaker. And
Uh-huh.
great speaker, very personal, very relatable. Like you said about the research in his book, we talked a little bit about technology and what it can and can't do and what it is doing to us. So
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
great that you were able to
yeah,
come to speak. That's really great. Yeah, I really love that book. Another book that I really enjoyed reading, and it was recommended by one of our campus leaders. It is called This Book Will Make You Kinder. And it talks about empathy. And something that really stuck out for me from that book is that you can't have empathy for people that you don't know. And so that was just a key thing that stuck for me. And it's an easy read. I really liked it. So
yeah,
so Patrick O'Rourke is our campus COO. And for his direct reports, he recommended that they all read that. So your common read, is that what you called it? Common read?
right now we're calling it the common
Uh-huh.
read. And as we like built it up, there's all these other this is great. I don't have a problem with it, but there's all these there's all these other reads now emerging on campus, which is great. But it's like washing out our efforts.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we've got to find language that really works and focuses on the effort that we're spearheading. So, but yeah.
So we have something similar to that, and we call it One Read.
Yeah.
Buff's One Read. And
Yeah.
last year it was the American Like Me or something. I can't remember the exact title, but it was written by America Ferrera.
Right.
And then this what I really liked about that book is I listened to it, and some of the folks that had contributed to it were actually speaking in the audiobook, which was really cool. I really liked that. And then this year's book is called Braiding Sweetgrass, and I'm reading it now, and I really like it.
You said braiding sweetgrass?
Yeah, Braiding Sweetgrass, I believe. Let me
it.
just
Yeah.
check. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, Braiding
Indigenous
Sweetgrass.
wisdom, scientific knowledge in the teaching of plants.
Yep, that's our one read for this year. Yeah, it's really great. Anytime I can learn more about Indigenous ways of being, I appreciate it, just because I feel like I know nothing.
Yeah. And there's hundreds, thousands of years of history, and it's just the knowledge that is there is not just a couple hundred years old. It's often epochs. It just goes back. Yeah, and it's really interesting stuff.
Looks like we have 4 more minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, we were saying this morning too, that this kind of thing, slowing down and having a day like this. So Coral has 2 meetings as part of its nonprofit status that it has to have. And it's really turned into more of a professional development kind of training organization. And it used to be resource sharing like back in the 70s. And so now it's kind of really changed and has went through its struggles and everything. But I was saying this morning to the group that it's just days like this where we slow down and actually think and focus on doing one thing. And it's just for everything that's going on these days, I myself am that busy that I haven't taken time to really kind of slow down and think about, because we're doing a lot of this DEI work here. And I've attended some of the trainings and tried to keep up with the work that we're doing. And I wonder, the larger conversation that libraries are having about it, you hear some. And so we were saying this morning, just everybody slowing down, coming together and having conversations about just what's going on in our libraries, conversations like this. These kind of meetings aren't going away. How do we make them better? We know inclusivity is rising. We know this period of time and what technology did to expose disparities. So it's really a timely talk. It's good stuff.
That is great. Yeah. So one of my top strengths, the Clifton strengths, is learner. So this is why I love doing these kinds of things, because I always learn from other people, like if they contribute even one little tip,
Right.
it's so great for me. So
Yeah, I hear you on that.
all right, I'm going to broadcast a message that we have just a couple of minutes to wrap up.
Yeah, I recently had, I'll tell you this one quick. I recently had hiring. So I recently went through a lot of candidates. And when we talk about language choice and how people write and how they speak in person, pre-COVID and post-COVID, because I've tried to hire in both these periods of time and had trouble finding candidates. Post-COVID, it is very different. I can tell you that much
Absolutely.
without talking about the candidates. It is
I know.
very different.
Yeah. I had a meeting with our talent acquisition team, because there's some things about technology that are being used for interviewing that are really great, and there's some things that are really not so great. And I found sort of a gap between, our campus is using, I'm going to go ahead and close out the breakout rooms. I just found that, there's a gap between the interview phase and sort of, well, anyway, we'll talk later.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks everyone for coming back. And looks like we have just a few folks still in the breakout room, so we'll just wait a moment. All right, everyone is back. So I do have a question that was asked to me by chat that I would like to answer. But first, I just want to do a quick wrap up, an overview of what we've learned today. So we've learned some of the reasons why it's important to have inclusive meetings, how some folks are being excluded, the implications of having a good inclusive meeting, arguments against having this kind of inclusion, and some barriers and how to mitigate them. So I just wanted to answer a question that was sent to me privately, and that is when people might accidentally use gendered language, like staffing a table. Some folks might say manning a table, and it is sort of gendered, and they ask, like, what's a good way to politely call people in when they are using unnecessarily gendered language? And I'll share my philosophy around that. And I learned this from one of the NCORE conferences that I went to last year. And I'm blanking out on her name, so just give me a moment, I'll remember what her name is. But she is writing a book right now called Calling In the Calling Out Culture. And I really like that because I personally don't like to call people out if I can avoid it. And it's just my personality, right? Everyone has a different journey. Everyone has a different, way of expressing themselves. What I like to do is call people in. So there's a difference between calling people in and calling people out. And what it means to call people in is just to check with them, individually and say, hey, I'm learning a lot about ungendering my language and inclusive language. And, I know that, like, saying manning a table is really easy because it just rolls off our tongue. And it's something that we've been exposed to all our life. But maybe just saying, can you staff a table, for example? That's just one example of how to do that. I don't have a perfect answer for that because I know that there's some issues that people feel like very called to, calling people out for different situations. And I totally support people that way. I know that this person that wrote this book, Calling In the Calling Out Culture, her perspective is that there are times when calling out people is the only way that we can, like, make some kind of impact. For example, if we are calling out our, politicians or presidents or things like that, where there's just not a way to email them directly and say, hey, so those are some thoughts and perspectives that I'd like to share. Okay, I have another question. Emmy said, Clara, a question came up in our group about navigating a work culture that may not be as receptive to some of these suggestions. We decided this was a great question for you. We can implement these strategies in meetings we run, but what about meetings that we aren't in charge of? Yeah, let me share a couple of ideas around that. I did share some ideas on how to have an inclusive participation sort of, protocol. So you can sort of help people. You can also reach out to meeting organizers and say, blame it on me. Say, hey, I went to this workshop and I learned a lot of great ideas about having inclusive meetings. What do you think about, having me share some ideas with you? I personally am happy to share with all of you. If you want me to come and do this presentation again for whatever organization you're with, I'm happy to do that. It's easy for me. I've done it many, many times. And something else that came up is that I was recently asked to do some work for a military group. And I really learned a lot about how I am sort of in a bubble, right? I'm in Boulder, I work out of CU Boulder, very liberal. People are very open to DE&I topics. And I did not realize how much work I needed to do personally to be able to reach folks that are more conservative in thought and philosophy. I personally have tried really hard to bridge that gap because it was giving me a lot of anxiety 2 elections ago. I joined a group on campus that is called Depolarizing Dialogues. And so it's attended by both, the left and the right and the middle, students, community members, staff, faculty, everybody. And we have these deep conversations. And I think the biggest part about that is learning how to listen and how to listen to others. And also coming to the realization that I am not going to change people's minds. People have to do that for themselves. I'm happy to educate folks. I'm happy to get feedback for my own education. And that is one way I've been trying to learn more about other thoughts. And one other thing that really helped me is that I subscribe to an email newsletter that comes Monday through Friday. It's called The Flip Side, and they will take the news of the day, and different analysts will talk about whatever topic it is, the news of the day, from both the left and the right. And that's really helped me a lot, because I really appreciate being able to really hear somebody else's perspective, because it helps me learn. I'm not sure if I answered the question. I know that, asking people to change the way they run meetings is sort of treading in, and I don't know, it's just a hard thing to do, but I think just, offering it as a way to be helpful might be one way of going about that. So thanks for those questions. We are almost out of time. I'm happy to stay on for a few more minutes if you have any more questions. Again, please feel free to email me. I do have a lot of trainings that I do on our campus around allyship. This inclusive meetings. I do workshops for becoming an inclusive leader, implicit bias, all sorts of things. So please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And thank you all for having me today. This was great.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Smith. It was fantastic. We are going into lunch, but if anybody wanted to stay on and have a conversation or ask more questions, it sounds like we got a little more time with Dr. Smith. But thank you. The session was fantastic. I think there was a lot of good that came out of it. Aaron's going to play some music, but we can start with questions or explore the topics or anything more. And if that fades away, then Aaron, if you could start the music, that'd be great.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Everyone seems to have made it back. Roughly, we have 14 people. That's kind of what we picked up this afternoon. So that's great. Lovely. Well, thank you for attending today. It's a very interesting conversation. As I was saying this morning, it's just nice to be able to slow down and talk with your colleagues and swap ideas and laugh a little and even maybe enjoy a glass of wine, maybe a little later. You should have the I think we've got them in meeting notes on our end, but if you don't have the items from the presenter this morning, we'll send those out through the listserv. But just thank you for attending today. As I was telling the last group, the library services and spaces group that I just left, I'm hoping this fall will be at somebody's library. I want a larger libraries and actually be able to be together in person and spend a little more time. Because as our presenter said, there is something about being in person and being put in that container where you then do have to focus and pay attention. We have so many competing pressures, times, messages, and things that when you're sitting in front of your computer, you can kind of drift a little bit. Or if you're at your office, you may have to deal with an HR issue or something. And if you're off-site somewhere, then you're just at the meeting. So there is really something valuable about being in person. So hoping this fall we'll have something set up like that. I'm talking to a few vendors also, so I'm hoping for this fall we might have a few vendor sponsored events for that day. So maybe an opening breakfast that's sponsored by a vendor, and a couple other events throughout the day that would be vendor sponsored, so that we can hear about new product services in the field, and then also kind of get the same pitch at the same time and compare notes that way. Workflows are changing, so I think it's a good time to be reaching out to vendors to have conversations like this. So hopefully if I get a little free time over the summer and this excellent board sticks around, we can really shape that fall meeting into something really special. So, but thank you for attending today. Anybody have any closing questions? I know there was a couple things on the agenda for the board to just make a couple final comments on. Let me check that. The survey. And I think
I posted the survey a couple times in the chat. I'm also going to send it out to Coral in general because we didn't post it this morning, and I want to make sure we hit everybody who came this morning. So you only have to fill it out once, just once. But I'm going to try and make sure everybody gets at least the opportunity to do that. So
excellent. Yanira, no, I saw the question and then it went away. I don't have my chat open. I'm on a new.
She wants to know if there's a date for the fall.
No date yet. We are talking to District 10 again, so it may be a conjoined effort again with District 10. Those seem to go well. So we may do something with them this fall, but late October, I think, is kind of the range.
I know I was at a District 10 meeting, and the one thing they were looking at was not scheduling it during early voting. So I know we usually do it at the very end of October, and there were some people requesting who work in public libraries for it to not be at that time because there'll be early voting going on at the public libraries. So I don't know how that's going to affect anything, but that did come up at a D10 meeting.
Interesting. Okay.
Interesting.
Great. Any other board member want to close out with any thoughts? Is there anything I'm missing that you wanted to share? Okay, great. Well, thank you for coming today.
Yeah. Thank y'all. Bye.
Thank you.